Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a quick little rundown for 1.0.7, which ended up dropping this morning. So, not exactly a earth-shattering patch, everyone's favorite various minor bug fixes and general stability improvements. You have two fixes to the chariot, so these are going to be cases where if somebody was going and resetting, like let's say for a drop or something, over and over and over and over and over, and they did so very frequently, and had done so for an extended period, apparently there was a crash and or soft lock that could happen. So either way, those have been corrected. The second one is one you've probably seen on my videos before, which is if you were switching between regular controls and mouse controls. If you had the mouse come in from the right side of the screen, it would be like a brrr kind of thing. So that has been corrected at this point. As far as the other four, they're still out there, though as per usual, I just want to throw a grain of salt on there that as far as many of those go, it's stuff that realistically on a on a development side, I'm really not shocked that they're pretty low priority. So let's cover those real quick, and sort of what they do, how they affect anyone and whatnot. So first and foremost, we have a couple of descriptions that are still kind of funky out there. Like let's say something like the feather coat technically should be saying that it enhances earth resistance, more so than it enhances air abilities and resistance. Technically speaking, it is air resistance, but realistically, its whole purpose is that if you're going and you're using your feather coat, for example, it's supposed to be giving you, earth resistance. So it is technically an air ability, you could argue, but either way, technically a wrong description is the thing. So this was a holdover from PSP. Obviously, there's a absolute shitload of different descriptors for everything, so when it comes to those kinds of things, it's not really too much of a shock that that's still out there. They have fixed a few text descriptions in the past. I'm not entirely sure why these ones in particular have been skipped. I mean, they have definitely been brought up, so again, it's very specific. Even something as oddly specific as the Cyclops ended up getting corrected, so again, it just seems a little bit of an odd one. Personally, in the back of my head, I keep wondering if it's what One Vision ran into for a while there, where certain text limits, just if you put the wrong thing, or if you put too many words in there, it would have adverse effects. In this particular case, I would assume it's, less letters. You just change it to enhances air resistance or something. I don't know. But anyway, point being, there's a kind of like a hidden text limit of sorts. So if you have played One Vision over the years, you've noticed those cases where there was a period way to the right of a description. Basically, that was a denotation of that particular limit. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of as far as why that has not been updated yet. Either way, kind of a minor thing, but just so you know, these work. I would say these are more of a kind of spiritual version of how it used to work for the rest of the series. A lot of times it gets forgotten that PSP is kind of the anomaly of the bunch, where previously elemental equipment was basically just, it ended up giving you resistance to the opposite element, which is what it does here. So like the wind coat over here resists earth. Lightning guy is weak to earth, therefore, it's a good armor for him kind of situation. So, either way, obviously there's more elements this time around, and, well, that itself was an expansion on the weird way that a lot of the elements were basically the same thing back in the PSP version. But that's a whole rabbit hole of its own. Point being, yeah, those descriptions are still out there. The second thing is when it comes to two-handed weapons, basically what it means, if you've heard of the two-handed relic bug or the two-handed weapon bug or whatever name it happens to go by this week, basically its whole shtick is that the weapon itself is functioning fine as a weapon, but if the weapon were to be exclusively used for int and mind bonuses, so for example this primarily is going to be affecting something like the Sage Staff and Wise Man Staff, this would basically mean that they are not applying their int and mind bonuses if it is a two-handed weapon. Now, again, just to throw this into context, for the grain of salt in this whole thing, this basically means that Sage Staff and Wise Man Staff are about the only two that are exclusively going to be casting type equipment that are going to be, and I guess I'm sure there's something along the lines of the some of the end game Heaven General weapons and whatnot. But as far as a primary purpose being those int and mind bonuses, Sage Staff, Wise Man Staff, that is their shtick. Now, the thing is, realistically speaking, it's not that they're even useless in this case. So, like, personally, I ended up finding a use for the Sage Staff here just for the MP bonus, because it caused this guy to have enough MP to be able to use most of his abilities if he were to be revived. But, anyway, So yeah, it mostly affects those two staffs most severely. Usually the thought gets extended out into places where it wouldn't function. So for example, something like, let's say, Fulkert over here is using a water crossbow, and usually the thought process extends to, well, you know, then that means that this is why this thing was doing pretty iffy damage with its acid rain, when realistically, I mean, he's a non-casting class with no casting bonuses for the most part. Essentially, he would be losing out on 2 intelligence and 2 mind, which is not going to be enough to throw this into anything more severe. Some of these are mostly just kind of utility features, like if he has a crit card picked up, something like Acid Rain could cause him to be able to go and displace several units at once, whereas realistically, for the most part, he's just using this to shoot at things, and the weapon is still applying its regular weapon bonuses correctly. It's just when used specifically as a spellcasting tool, and only if it's a 2-handed version. So if somebody were to go over here, and he were to go use this one, the Int and Mind off of the sword would be applying correctly. And in the case where the spell being used was super effective against the other guy, then would also apply the weapons element here, for that extra 15%. Bear in mind, though, that a lot of these numbers typically won't show up under most circumstances, just due to general resistance shenanigans. I'm not going to get into every single one of the numbers or what have you. Go look at recessions numbers for all of those, but typically this is, like, those kinds of numbers getting eaten up by the formula is usually why these things are seen as more severe than they are. So for the most part, this will affect, like, ultra min-max builds that wanted to use weapons they wouldn't normally use for casting for the purpose of casting. In practical terms, this means Sage Staff and Wise Man Staff kind of suck until it gets fixed, and Ripple's Rod is extra good. So that's, you know, kind of the end of that whole thing, give or take. Anyway, did I remember to bring up the armor thing? I think I did. Sorry, brain is in a bit of a severe cloud today. In case I didn't bring up the armor thing, basically, the flavor numbers at the top there, they go up or down slightly every now and then, but only in the case where it is the player being hit by something. So realistically, your damage is applying just fine. Enemy damage occasionally will go up or down by like 1 to 3% on average, give or take. There are exceptions. There are exceptions to everything. That's what makes this this whole series so dang complicated to ever explain. Oh, and then the last thing is the debuffs. Personally, I don't think this is a bug. It's very rare to see things directly turned off, and usually when they are directly turned off, it's for a reason. So, for example, if you were to set this wizard to AI, he would never use his charm. And the general idea behind this is just that, well, the AI won't be hitting you with those debuffs. And this also means that stuff like dragons and your cockatrices and your griffins and whatnot suddenly get a chance to shine after absolutely ages of not being used for frickin' anything. So these are, for all intents and purposes, kind of a middle ground between different versions. Like the Griffins feel very much like a middle ground between the Knight of Lotus and OB64 Griffins. The Dragons feel like a middle ground between their March of the Black Queen and Ogre Battle 64 kind of things. A lot of these feel like versions from previous games. And they did mention that obviously a lot of things were inspired by back from the SNES era. So reason why I don't think this is a bug at this point, like I previously mentioned, typically stuff isn't directly turned off unless it's intentional. I have yet to see anything that kind of breaks that rule. But back in PSP, you typically saw stuff where I was joking for a while that the Witch of the PSP version was actually the Terror Knight, because all they did was spam Paralytic Wave. That used to be the entire purpose of the Witch back in the original versions. So like back in March of the Black Queen, literally all they did was run up and spam Paralytic Wave. That was the entire purpose of that class. You had them, you had a fast unit with Paralytic Wave, they went and they destroyed an entire squad, and then you had somebody else go in with DPS to clean up. They were essentially a magical flashbang. So, which I guess also could double as a dirty joke, because they love their weird, subtle, dirty jokes, but anyway. So, in this particular case, we have the Cyclops taking over for that particular role, where casters were given the ability to crit and hit at far longer ranges. Suddenly the debuffs on these guys matter. Like I've said it before, I'll say it again, as far as dragons, as far as, you know, golems, griffins, cockatrices, cyclopes, even juggernauts. These are units that had all of these debuffs back in the PSP version and in other previous versions as well, but they never got a chance to see the light of day because, quite frankly, wizards did all of their jobs better. So essentially, wizards were changed back into their kind of March of the Black Queen role, where they're the long-range damage guy, and they would swap out for whatever, you know, spells would be hitting better. Obviously, that part's a little bit different. But then, you know, you want your guaranteed poison, you use your Hydra, you want your guaranteed weaken, you got your fire dragons, you want your units to start missing, you use your dragon Pikachus over here, you want damage gone, you use your water dragon, that kind of stuff. Obviously, some of them didn't quite make the transition as well as you'd like, but, you know, you still have stuff like your enfeeble, you know, mass enfeebles coming out and stuff like that. But either way, personally, this feels like a step in the right direction. It's just nice to see units that typically never got to see any love whatsoever having a reason to be used and stuff like that. Like, realistically, the Cyclops was an absolute joke back in PSP, and now this time around, something like Howl is so dang good that you see it on the last boss, you know? Anyway, so, to me, that doesn't feel like an accident, but either way, obviously everyone's opinions are going to be different. I guess spam Matsuno on Twitter, see if we can get an answer on that for sure, because I know I've been trying for months and gotten absolutely no answer whatsoever. Obviously, I'm pretty sure it wasn't even... whatever happened there, I'm not even sure it was his decision to begin with. But, alright. So that's that for this particular update. I gotta go sort out my dang nose, so y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care. Yeah, if there's any updates on anything to report, I will go ahead and report. Have yourselves a good one. Take care.